And we're on. And this is 3 yards per carry. I'm Alfredo Artiaga. Simon Clancy is here, back from Madrid. And Chris Kaufman is here. And this is two in a row for the first time all year. As always, we are brought to you by 305-800-PAIN. No pain this week. Just like the Dolphins, no pain this week. But you need to be ready too. After an accident, your first move should be to call 305-800-PAIN. Better Business Bureau accredited with an A+ rating. Your car accident, personal injury specialist, fast connections with trusted doctors and attorneys, always ready to take your call 24/7. Again, that's 305-800-PAIN, 305-800-PAIN. And look, we're getting closer to Christmas. It's right around Thanksgiving, so you might want to start thinking about a stocking stuffer. And why not give us some money in the process? So go to our store. Our store is at onlyfins.printify.me, and we got the McDaniel Troll t-shirt there. It's kind of a hit. It'd be good if, they won more games and this shirt actually means something, because if not, we might be doing another shirt for Mike McDaniel. But we're going to get into this game, and we're going to talk about some of the young players, some that will not be with us for the rest of the season, Juju Brents. But
that made it sound like they were dead.
Well, he is under contract for next year, by the way, Juju Brents. So maybe he's a roster player.
He's on his rookie deal.
Yeah, so he's on the team next year. But as advertised, this is something that always happens with Juju Brents, and it happened now. He was not having a good game in that game against the Commanders. He was actually pretty bad in that game. Missed 2 tackles that should have been 2-yard gains that turned into 8-yard gains, and he had a lapse in coverage. He wasn't good in that game, but he was very good against the Bills, and I guess you want to see what he can give you next season, at least in camp. All right, let's get into this game, and let's start with the debate. Everybody's been having this debate. I think that we're going to have a couple of differences of opinion here. I did not mind them going for it on 4th and 1 at the end of the game, and I'll tell you why. Best case scenario, you score the touchdown. I think the game is probably over. You don't score the touchdown, they take over at the 1-yard line. They need 60 yards to try a 57-yard field goal. You kick the field goal, now you got to kick off. And if you kick off, now you're opening yourself up to what happened against the Chargers, what happened against the Patriots, what happened later on that day to the Minnesota Vikings. They kicked off after a field goal, and the Bears returned it 62 yards. They also get to play with 4 downs to get that field goal. So I kind of like ending it right there at the 1-yard line. We can, go back and forth the sequence that got up to that last play with Ollie Gordon, where it was just failures across the board. But what do you think of that last sequence in regulation, Simon?
I didn't mind going for it on 4th down. I thought the 3rd down play was terrible. I mean, my biggest issue was that, I had a lot of issues with the play calling at the weekend. My biggest issue was that, you take the hammer out and to bring in the 185-pounder, and you don't even run him, straight through the A-gap. You try and run him sort of off tackle. It just makes no sense to me. Like, running off tackle at the goal line is one of the dumbest plays of all time, especially when you're in a tight formation. And
you're begging for lost yardage. You're begging for lost yardage.
And sorry to interrupt you. On that play call, they essentially were trusting Cole Strange to block Javon Kinlaw one-on-one.
But if they're going to run off tackle and they're not going to do what they were doing early in the games, then they completely went away from, which is standard Mike McDaniel. Why wouldn't they run over the left side, like where your 2 most physical players are? And then poor Ollie Gordon has to come back in on 4th down. And they stuff it. So look, I think hindsight is a beautiful thing. I didn't have a massive issue with the decision per se. I think if the Commanders had scored and won the game, I think Mike McDaniel would have been fired. I think we'd have been doing this show now going, well, we don't have a head coach anymore, so what's going to happen? Because I just think the way that all played out, Chris, at the weekend, did not all go well for the future of Mike McDaniel. And I think that decision, rightly or wrongly, would have been the death knell if they'd have lost. to his Miami career.
I think that the decision to go for it on fourth down, like you, I believe that's secondary to the third down decision. I think that set the table really for a bad fourth down call. In the situation they faced, they had third and a short yard. I mean, it was inside the 1 yard line. If you look at the placement of the ball, that's territory where you have things on the table like a QB sneak, or some teams the tush push. I think all teams should be attempting to perfect that, since it's been an obvious winning strategy, and it hasn't been
in case that quarterback gets hit in the head. But
right, but I mean, tush push it with the tight end like we've done before.
Julian Hill. Julian Hill plays quarterback. Like he plays quarterback.
Yeah, he's a former quarterback. So I think that all teams should be exploiting that until it is made illegal, which I think it will eventually. So a short yard has a lot of things on the table, is the bottom line. Is a short yard has a lot of things that are straightforward, straight up the A gaps, kind of on the table, including, and probably should have been the Ollie Gordon play. That should have been the Ollie Gordon carry on that third and a short yard. I think they went for it with the intention, or they called that third down play with the intention of going for it on fourth down. And I think it was because, Devon Achane, who has produced a lot of touchdowns in his short career, and you have to give it to him. I think that they thought off tackle, not quite off tackle, because it was basically B gap, but I think that you have to be thinking along the lines of, okay, Devon Achane play, a typical strong Devon Achane play first, and then, okay, if it didn't work out, then we still have Ollie Gordon in our back pocket, and we can do that. The problem is that Devon Achane is the running back in the league, and Mike McDaniel's rushing attack is the ground game in the league, most likely to take a lost yard. Since Mike McDaniel took over in 2022, and Devon Achane, I believe he might be have the highest propensity of all running backs for taking lost yardage. So you were begging, and not just that, it's the play call itself, the structure of the play call itself. Particularly you're asking Cole Strange, a backup quarterback you claimed off of waivers, to go up one-on-one and win his block, and that's begging for trouble, and you get lost yardage. That's what happened. It turned from a short yard to a long yard. And if you look at the spot of the ball, that's what happened. They were at a short yard inside the 1 yard line, and then they had a long yard outside of the 1 yard line, and that makes things a lot more difficult. So I think that they called that third down with it in mind that they're going to go for it on the fourth down, because they're thinking, okay, we're going to try with Devon Achane first, and then we'll go back to Ollie Gordon. And it should have been reversed. It should have been Ollie Gordon first on the short yard, or some sort of tush push or whatever, what have you, maybe even a fullback dive. So it was set up by a bad third down call. That was really set up by a bad third down call. Now, as for the fourth down call itself, I would not have gone for it. And I think that this is where, analytics as numbers on a page can fail you, because there are multiple variables that a number on a page truly cannot account for and cannot describe, because it is limited. So, I'm speaking as a quantitative guy. I'm a portfolio risk management specialist for a living. I think that there are a lot of variables that you can't account for when you're looking at those sorts of odds. And, a lot of people are kind of talking about, well, they had a 3% greater chance if they, what I'm saying is that earlier in the game, you had a goal line stuff. All right, fourth down, went for it, and you got stood up, or you got stoned out of the end zone. And if you pay attention to that sequence itself, you got stoned again just now, because you got stoned on third down. You should have been, if usually you get stoned on third down, that means you got to settle for a field goal. But they got stoned again. So that's twice in the day that you got stoned out of the end zone in that sort of that goal line situation against this team. And I don't care what the previous games were saying. In this game, you just got kept out of the end zone twice, right? And I think that you have to take account of that. And so, you know, that's something that the analytics and probabilities won't be able to account for necessarily. I think here they would have had to account for it. So, you know, and ultimately you have to think about your personnel as well, because the Dolphins have in the guard positions, they have Jonas Avaiania, who has been pretty bad this year. Like, I think it's safe to say that. I don't think it's controversial. And Cole Strange, backup, just picked up off waivers, and they're bracketing probably the smallest center in the NFL, right? So you are not strong up the middle. You are not. Don't pretend you are. Okay. Don't pretend that those analytics that tell you 4th and a long yard is the right decision in, you know, under 2 minutes in that situation. Don't pretend that that applies to you the exact same way as it applies to the Philadelphia Eagles, right? Who are dragging up those sorts of probability averages and stuff like that with their success with the tush push and stuff like that. They're not in the same boat. So you have to have awareness of your team, your own strengths and weaknesses, and what's already been happening on the day. And I don't think the Dolphins were. I think that they called the 2-play sequence thinking they were going to go for it. And what ended up happening is what ended up happening, you know, and they should have lost on that. You know, the Commanders were kicking a field goal to win the game, to end regulation. And no, they didn't have a good kicker, and they didn't get that field goal, even though, you know, people are kicking 56-yarders like they're 46-yarders this year. You know, I think that what ended up happening is what you were begging for once you account for really all of the variables and not just, you know, those numbers on a page of the average NFL team, which is including a bunch of teams that are kind of dragging up that average, like the Eagles with their success in the tush push and so on and so forth. It's not, this is not that team. The Dolphins are not that team. And so they should not have gone for it.
Yeah. Another thing that we talked about in the preview, Chris, that I want to get Simon's take on this was Dan Quinn taking over play calling for the Commanders. And going into this game, the Dolphins were 13 for 13 on goal-to-goal situations, all touchdowns. Ollie Gordon was 9 for 11. He's 9 for 11 now on 3rd and 4th and 1. Actually, 9 for 12. 2 of the misses are in this game. If you watch Dan Quinn's defense, especially on the goal line, and it's now 2 games where Mike McDaniels won both, but they're now 2 for 11 in the red zone against Dan Quinn's defense in 2 games. If you watch the sequences on the goal line, Dan Quinn keeps calling slants and guessing correctly. I got the sense he had a beat on short yardage running game of the Miami Dolphins all game. And I thought Dan Quinn had an excellent game calling defense. Your thoughts, Simon?
Yeah, I thought it was. I thought generally that there's no moral victories in sport, certainly not in football. But I thought that Dan Quinn's team, I thought that Cliff Kingsbury and his play design and his scheme, I just thought the coaches far outweighed the Dolphins coaches in terms of how they performed. I thought coming in that Washington might be lucky to stay within 2 touchdowns. And actually, I think they're unlucky not to win the game, frankly. They're no huddle. I know they coming into the game, they ran no huddle at 67%, which led the league, but I think they were up in the 90 percentile. And it stopped Miami from being able to substitute. We got caught with big packages on the field when they wanted to throw, and when they wanted to run. We got caught in nickel and dime defenses. And generally, I just thought they did a really good job of getting the ball out quickly out of Mariota's hands. I don't think he was sacked. I think 2 were sacked 3 or 4 times. I know 2 sacks were slightly different. They weren't just kind of guys getting beaten around the edge. But yeah, I thought Washington were extremely unlucky to lose that game. And I thought that the job that Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. To a lesser extent and Cliff Kingsbury did was excellent. So yeah.
Chris?
Yeah, I think so. It's funny because we had it in the preview, talking about you were bringing up that it felt like to you that actually it's the other way around, that Mike McDaniel owns Dan Quinn's defense and his play calling. That was a point
what I said is
that was a point you brought up on the preview.
Yeah,
and
the
Shanahan, but also
the Shanahan
Mike
tree.
McDaniel.
Yeah, well, they have wins. The Shanahan tree, for whatever reason, they are extending like their win streak against Dan Quinn. But Mike McDaniel, like I said, 2 for 11 in the red zone against Dan Quinn in 2 games.
We're right, but you also, you brought up I think it was the Cowboys game and things like that, and that this is this seems to be a thing, and I've seen this kind of out there on Twitter and on social media as well. A lot of the hey, let's explain the offensive struggles of the Dolphins by talking about knows Mike McDaniel. Well, it was supposed to work the other way around before the game, and now after the game, now that they had yet another bad showing on offense in a situation where they have to travel, or there's some kind of there's some kind of strange situation, circumstances surrounding the game. Now it's kind of gone the other way. It's Dan Quinn knows Mike McDaniel so well that he stops him on the goal line, or that he has a beat on Mike McDaniel's play calling. It should have been the other way around. Like, it could have been the other way around. It easily could have been. These guys know each other very well. So Mike McDaniel could know Dan Quinn's defense so well and so thoroughly that he just trounces it every time. That's something that we have to think about as we're kind of looking at the offensive coaching and the evaluation. But I think that, coming away from this is a head coach versus a head coach. And Mike McDaniel as a head coach has truly been not good whenever he is facing some sort of situation where a head coach has to go up against a head coach in strange circumstances or unusual circumstances. We're talking about circumstances that impact the practice week, like short week and things like that. We're talking about owners travel, like West Coast travel or international travel, playoff games, primetime games, cold games, any kind of situations, anything that's really other than a Sunday 1 p.m. or 4 p.m. home game. The Mike McDaniel offense falls apart, and that is consistently, and that's been happening for 4 years. And so you have to really ask this question. And I think that we find ourselves in these situations, particularly if there's conditions, if there's cold games, who can simplify better, and who can get their team to execute better. And it just seems like Mike McDaniel tends to be out coached in every single one of those situations. And so I think that that's the concern that we have to have, even if we're talking about Mike McDaniel as not the head coach, but as the offensive, quote unquote guru, is yes, he does run a potent offense, but it is a potent offense on home games on Sunday at 1 p.m. or 4 p.m. only. and that is pretty much only the circumstances in which the offense thrives. He needs to be able to show more variability in the situations in which he can have that offense perform, and he didn't do it this week. They definitely did not do it this week, and this was a hobbled Commanders team that they went against. And so it was on the verge of being one of the all-time embarrassing moments, I thought, in several points of the game. But they did come out, they did gut it out and come out ahead, and credit to them for that. But I think the question remains that even as an offensive guy, is Mike McDaniel's offensive chops, are they fatally flawed? Because guess what happens? Guess what you need to be able to do to win in the playoffs. You need to be able to win in cold. You need to be able to win in another team's stadium. You need to be able to win with an impacted practice week. I mean, God help you if you go to the Super Bowl, right? You need to be in various circumstances and conditions, prime time, things like that. You need to be able to take that offense into those circumstances and actually win. Otherwise, you just have a flashy offense that does you some good in September, October in the home games, and then nothing else, no other situation. And this was another moment, a narrative busting moment where they could have busted that narrative in this game, or at least attempted to, and they didn't. And so it ends up coming off as Dan Quinn outcoached Mike McDaniel, and that's a bad one to have. I think that, and further, if you expand on that, you would look at the defense and how they performed, the Miami defense now, and how they performed in this game, and you would look at sort of like the straight upward trajectory of that Miami defense from the beginning of the year on, where they just keep getting better and better and better, whereas the offense kind of does this, always this, right? It does. It isn't on the same. It isn't on the same path. It's good here, Sunday home game, and then bad here, and then good here, and then bad here. And at this point, you'd have to say that the equity that the Dolphins have in coaching staff is greater on defense than on offense. And so that's because that's what the signs are pointing to. And so, again, it points back to, this Mike McDaniel question. If we were to fire him, I'm not saying to do it, maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't. But if we were, what are we afraid that we're losing? What are we really afraid that we're losing if he is dismissed? Because he's not showing that there's a lot that you'd be afraid to lose. And I think this game shows that.
Yeah, there's something about that tree, because I went back and I looked at some of the scores for, and I kind of figured it out, kinda. I looked at Kyle Shanahan's scores whenever he goes on the road or to the cold. He's won, but his offense has been not good. But that doesn't happen to Sean McVay. And could it just be the quarterback? Could it just be that Sean McVay has Matt Stafford? And that's why he can overcome cold. He could overcome being an underdog on the road. He can overcome short weeks. While Kyle Shanahan, that tends to happen to Kyle Shanahan a lot. And I don't think we could
very well could be
O'Connell. I don't think we could judge O'Connell, by the way, because he has a rookie quarterback this year.
Yeah. Well, sort of like a rookie, but I think that's a fair point. It could be that. It could absolutely be the quarterback. I do think that some tendencies that we've established under Mike McDaniel with Tua Tagovailoa, the pair of them, were very different than the tendencies that were established with Tua Tagovailoa at quarterback in the 2 years prior, though. And two of those tendencies that are a little bit different, I believe, I can go back and look at the statistics to be sure, but I believe those sorts of circumstances were not necessarily, I believe they were a more rugged, robust kind of, offense, which is to say not a great offense at all, but they didn't have this massive drop off necessarily in those circumstances. But I also noticed there's the second fatal flaw of Mike McDaniel's offense as an offensive guru, the sponsor of the offense, is the fact that they get a lot less effective as the game goes on, and a lot less potent. And they have the steepest drop off in potency from, in terms of being able to score per drive. They have the steepest over the last 4 years. They have the steepest drop off of any offense in the NFL when it comes to, drives 1, 2, 3, 4, dropping off, going steadily to drive 5, 6, 7, 8. And guess where games are won, though? Games are won at the end of the game. They're not won at the beginning of the game, especially the tough games, the really tough games against the good teams and stuff like that. So again, with these sorts of fatal flaws, you have to, and that was not the case with Tua in the 2 years prior. I know that was an opposite. It was actually the offense got better as the game went on when Tua was at quarterback in 20 and 21. So, it's something about this offense, and it makes you really question what we're losing here.
That's good analysis. Absolutely. All right, we're going to go to break, and we're going to talk about some of the players in this game, some of the young players in this game. But first, these words. All right, and we're back. We're gonna get to the offense a little bit because I thought that this game was eye-opening in a lot of respects. Not that we didn't know about the deficiencies that they have on offense before this game, or that they might have going forward. Although they're gonna get a little healthy here over the bye week.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to start on the defensive side of the ball. All three rookies on the defensive line played. Zeke Biggers, to me, looks like a guy, man, he has pass rushing chops. Not that he's gonna show you a bag, but he's strong and he's long.
Mm-hmm.
And when he gets his hands up, like you can, there was a couple of times where there's a play where Mariota is like hurrying the play along because he thinks Zeke Biggers is right behind him and he's actually blocked. But he flashes because he's so big that in pass rush reps, man, if he just gets just a little bit of a move, a little bit of an edge into the gap, he's going to affect the play. So I thought that he played well in that regard. In the run game, man, he looked like a guy that wasn't used to getting doubled and getting duoed. He was displaced. He had a rough time. Kenneth Grant, I thought that this was his best game so far as a rookie. And Jordan Phillips, I think I think we're done there. I think that's a guy, that's a roster player for a while. The guy's 20 years old, guys. He's 20 years old. So he doesn't have his man strength yet. So let's keep it to the defensive line and we'll move on a little bit here. But Simon, the three rookies on the defensive line, your assessment?
Yeah, I mean, I talked about it before. I think Phillips is Phillips is going to be a monster in this league. I think, especially, his hand movement is so good, but also just his ability to anchor. I mean, he can drop anchor against doubles and rip off and make tackles. I think he proved that at the weekend. Grant has that kind of quickness. I think once he gets his leverage down, his pads down, his pad level down, I think he'll be a dangerous player in terms of, look, I don't know what his ceiling is, like in terms of, is he going to be a down-to-down dominator? No. Is he going to provide interior pass rush pressure that's going to get you 7 sacks? No. But it will be on those kind of early downs, first and second down, just making impact, just ripping off guys, just not allowing those centers to get up and run their hips through contact and those sorts of things, and just coming off, using his hands, standing people up and getting into the backfield to make plays. And that's what you kind of need him to do, because, I don't think the Dolphins have done a particularly good job of getting teams into second and long, 2nd and 10, 2nd and 11, 2nd and 9s. And I think that's where his ability will come through. And Biggers had the second most pressures on the team against Buffalo behind Bradley Chubb. He's a big human being. So I think it's a gentle arrow up for all of them, which is good to see. And that's what you want. I mean, I don't think the impact, look, it's difficult. People, and Tyler Warren's kind of slightly gone off the ball a little bit over the last couple of weeks, but just in terms of kind of the noise rather than anything else, rather than his own performances. But, it's very hard to judge an interior defensive lineman whose best plays very rarely show up on the stat sheet against a guy who's catching balls and doing different things and, on offense. And with the greatest respects, 75% of people don't know what they're looking at anyway when it comes to interior defensive line play, especially with all the kind of stunts and gains and all those sorts of things that happen on a down-to-down basis. And so, yeah, his impact will never be fully appreciated by people, but I thought finally he feels like he's turned a little bit of a corner, Grant, and that's what you want. And really what you want to do is get to the end of the season and be like, yeah, okay, he kind of gets it now. Now let's have an off season in the weight room and and all those sorts of things, and really come back firing Chris next year.
Yeah, this is going to be like a horse race between the two of them, Jordan Phillips and Kenneth Grant, and that is to Jordan Phillips' credit, because it wasn't supposed to be a horse race. You take a guy at the top of the first round, toward the top of the first round, versus you take a guy down where Jordan Phillips was taken. That's not supposed to be a horse race, right? But I think that, and I hate to draw like early conclusions, and I was a big Kenneth Grant fan coming out of the draft, but the early conclusions are that that one of these two looks like he has a lot more star. I don't know if about a lot more star power, but more star power than the other, and it's not the guy that was taken in the first round. That said, this was one of his best games, one of his better games. Kenneth Grant, he is slowly getting better and better, and I think that but what this season has also kind of shown me is that I don't know if what we're reaching for, what we're working for with a Kenneth Grant in the long run is so much, the guy, what's the guy in the Giants name that played with Christian Wilkins at Clemson?
Dexter Lawrence.
Dexter Lawrence. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if we're going so much for Dexter Lawrence as maybe more of an Ashawn Robinson. That's what this season as it's gone on has said. And I hate to draw conclusions about very early in a guy's career because the growth is not linear, and I think that we say that, or I think that we have to keep that in mind. But yeah, Jordan Phillips is the guy that now you have your eye on toward the future because he could be something a lot higher or a lot better years from now. But then again, hey, next year, who knows? Like I said, it is a horse race. But congratulations to Jordan Phillips for making it a horse race because that was not supposed to be the case.
All right, and moving on to the next level, and we're going to talk about an edge player. There's no rookie linebackers. Although I want to talk about Dante Trader and this coaching staff. Dante Trader plays 3 good games, and then he gets buried in the depth chart inexplicably behind Ashton Davis. Hey, you know what? Let's go there, and then we'll bitch about Chop Robinson after this one. Simon, come on. Anthony Weaver's been winning me over because he's doing what Chris said he would do, that the defense would get better as the season's gone on. At the beginning of the season, we thought, oh my God, these corners are going to be dog shit. They're actually decent going forward, but they have to stop doing this. Who gives a shit about Ashton Davis? Who? Jack Jones. Who gives a shit about Ashton Davis? Seriously. Dante Trader just finished playing 3 good games, and then he gets buried in a game where he should play a lot, and he would actually fit pretty well against the Commanders. What did you make of that decision? Because that one is just mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was probably. I mean, I don't know what it was down to. I think there was a couple of plays with the, some of the bad angles and some of those. But I think he's played well, Trader. I think he's played well this season. Generally, I mean, I remember some. There was a really good pass breakup against Atlanta on the sidelines. There was a big play, a big hit. I think he's shown more range than I expected him to. I think he was probably. I heard Ollie Connolly talking about him a couple of weeks ago and saying how, and I felt the same coming out. But Ollie was talking about how he'd seen him live. I think he said, I can't remember now, but was saying that arguably the biggest hitter of any safety coming out, and I think he's a really physical player. It just feels like he's growing into his role on the team. And like I said, it felt like he was a bit more rangy than I expected him to be. And I thought he played well again at the weekend. And, this is a kid that, he's certainly rosterable next season. I don't know who's going to be the defensive coordinator next year, Chris, whether it will remain Anthony Weaver, and if so, whether or not he continues with that kind of 3 safety-ish sort of. I mean, to say it's 3 safeties it's not like they're just lining 3 safeties up. I mean, he does a lot of box work, but we've seen him in man coverage. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago when he was unfortunately manned up down the field against who was it? Somebody
Zay Flowers,
which is kind of not what you want to see. Then I can remember commentating at the weekend. I can't remember what the play was, but I remember him down the field making a play on a ball with somebody. And I was like, okay, and he was obviously there in the mix with the horrendous Jack Jones penalty that never was, obviously. And he was in great position there as well. So I think there's a lot to work on. I think he's an interesting, intriguing looking player who probably has earned a starting spot, Chris, going into next season.
I think a lot will depend on what you do with Minkah Fitzpatrick next year, because with him manning the slot, in absence of Cater Kohu, that makes it a lot easier to play more of those safeties, including Dante Trader. It's an interesting up-down decision. I wonder if there's some sort of injury or hurt that played into it, or whether this was just purely a matchup thing. I don't think that the Washington offense has a particular amount of speed that I would be worried about with Dante Trader necessarily. It could be a Krosky Merritt, kind of worried about a big run being broken off by Krosky Merritt running back, which can happen when you have a little bit of a slow-footed safety. Trying to re-angle in some situations. It could have been that, but it is a curious decision overall. I think that the dominoes start tipping over when you figure out what's going to happen with Minkah Fitzpatrick next year. Because if he is back in $15.6 million and they're going to pay him that, and Cater Kohu is back in the slot, and things are settled down that way, then you've got less room for the safety opposite Minkah Fitzpatrick. Like right now, you could say they're doing a bunch of 3 safety defense, but it's not really 3 safety defense. It's because Minkah Fitzpatrick has replaced Cater Kohu. Like that they had Cater, he got hurt. They've had several of his replacements get hurt, including Jason Maitre. We never even get to talk about him, but last year, he was kind of brushing up to be that backup behind Cater Kohu, and he got hurt. Even Artie Burns got hurt. He was going to be a slot. It's just a cursed position. And so that means that Minkah Fitzpatrick has had to man it and has had to play that position. So it's not really a 3 safety defense so much as, this is what we've had to do. But playing Melifonwu out there and Ashton Davis instead of Dante Trader, certainly curious. I think arrow up and still on Dante Trader, regardless of what happened that way. But I think that the secondary is clearly shaping up. Juju Brents didn't necessarily have a great game, but before he got hurt. But it was interesting that they were willing to start him. Out there over Rasul Douglas. That was not expected for me. I thought as soon as Rasul Douglas comes back, that's the guy they're going to go ahead and start. So they clearly are trying to uncover some talent in that secondary, and see what they might have going forward that way. The one caution that I would have about Brents is, if Chris Greer were still here, I would say 100%, this is exactly what's going to happen. But the one game that we had a tremendous game against Keon Coleman, but that's a very particular type of receiver.
It was also a healthy scratch this weekend.
Right. And supposedly that was because of a discipline issue, but that's still, I prefer to think of it as Juju Brents ended his Bills career. But I think that that's a very particular type of receiver. I mean, I'm not trying to say that Keon Coleman is a sucky receiver. I'm saying that he's a particular type, and it's one that Juju Brents matches up well with. And
Devontae Parker class.
Yes, yeah, and so he matched up well with him and had a great game, a really great game. But in this league, you're going to go against a bunch of different type of receivers, right? And a bunch of situations, including situations where you got to come up and tackle, and then you're missing those tackles, and now you're not having as good of a game. So the caution would be: don't take that one game. Don't do the Dolphin fan thing or the Chris Greer thing, and read into the one game and be like, here it is. We've found it, and going forward, and now that he's injured, he's not even going to have any opportunities to show up or down whether he can follow up on that one good game. So the Chris Greer thing would be to count on Juju to be a starter next year. That would 100% happen. But Chris Greer is not going to be the general manager anymore. He's already been fired, and we'll see who replaces him, whether it's Champ Kelly or whether it's somebody else. But that is the caution, because, in some ways, this is how we got stuck with, and I'm not trying to denigrate him too badly, but this is how we got stuck with Tyrell Dodson. we picked him up off of waivers. It was very curious that Seattle chose to toss him out, even though he was voted a captain earlier that year. Same thing we did with David Long, though. And then he came in and he played those 3 games and he got those interceptions, and it's like, holy crap, what a great 3-game tryout. And then we're counting on him as a starter all year long. And frankly, as we go on, it's become more obvious that the linebackers and safeties are more of an issue, even in the coverage scheme, than the corners. And that shouldn't be the case when you're picking up guys at corner that were just sitting there playing. If the phone doesn't ring, it's me, with other general managers in the league, even as training camp starts, even as the regular season is starting. So the caution, that's the caution on Juju Brents. And I think that Tyrell Dodson is a little bit of the cautionary tale in that way.
All right. And let's finish up on the defense with Chop Robinson. I watched this game, actually decent against the run, setting the edge. But good God, it's just it happens. And I hate to just look, he could just rip off 8 sacks here to finish off the season. And we're like, oh, we're back. But it seems just like a lost season for Chop Robinson. He hurt his knee and these are not excuses. These are facts. He hurt his knee in training camp, re-aggravated it again against the Patriots on a cheap shot that didn't get flagged, by the way, and then got a concussion later on. I don't think he's recovered from that knee or from the concussion. He's off of the protocol, but I think that knee has lingered all year. This is not the same Chop Robinson. He's anchoring well. He's playing the run well. His pass rushes are pass rushes to nowhere so far. He's not impacting the game in the passing game at all. Your thoughts, Simon? Yeah, it is a lost season, in my opinion. Prove me wrong, but your thoughts, Simon Chop Robinson?
I think he's had an extremely disappointing, extremely mediocre season. And actually, you talk about the run game. He was responsible for that Mariota 40-yard run. I just don't think he just doesn't have I don't know what it is. I didn't like it at Penn State, and I don't like it in the NFL. I don't think he can hold up physically against the run consistently. And his pass rush is just, there was a couple of really good bendy up the arc rushes, but yeah, I'm struggling a little bit to see it with him, and maybe as a holdover from the knee injury. But then there's times where you just see him bend and you think, I don't think your knee can be that bad if you can bend like that. The play where he almost got the safety was a pretty bendy rush, but he just seems to get handled by average NFL tackles, and that's not good enough. And I think that puts a big question mark over his head moving into year 3, because I think there was a lot of optimism as we came out of year 1 and into year 2, and I think lots of people expected him to take an extra step forwards. He's a good kid and apparently he works really hard, but for whatever reason, it's just not. And the problem is as well, he's had really, really good mentors. Say what you like about the leadership and the culture on this team, which we know has been a problem. But when your mentors are Calais Campbell, Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips, in terms of how you handle yourself as a player.
And Matthew Judon, by the way. Matthew Judon.
And Teron
Armstead. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's 5 pretty spectacular mentors to have in terms of teaching you how to live off the field, how to eat, how to recover, and then all the stuff that you do on the field in terms of hand placement and all those sorts of things. That would be a concern moving forwards. And the run stuff really doesn't seem to be getting any better for me when you take the whole body of work, Chris. And yeah, it's that would be a significant worry for me.
Yeah, I think that I listen again. I was a big fan of his coming out of the draft. He had, I thought, the rookie year that I thought he could have, and it was very promising. But the conditions for that rookie year to be as promising as it was were one where both Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb were injured and went off the field. And so we're left with, when the defensive coordinator, Anthony Weaver, and his assistant coaches have choices in front of them, they keep choosing someone else, and they keep choosing Bradley Chubb. They keep choosing Jalen Phillips. Now they're choosing Matthew Judon to eat into his, not just his snaps,
And
but
Quentin
his
Bell.
opportunities.
And Quentin Bell.
Quentin Bell. So given the choice, last year with Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips there wasn't much choice, and I think he did well, with what they put on him and what they asked him to do in those pass rush situations. But now I'm reminded of, and this goes back to the thesis behind drafting him. There was a lot to be made. He played in a similar style defense, and it's supposed to be maybe a guy that Anthony Weaver had some say over drafting himself. We don't know any of that to be true. It could have been just Chris Greer doing his Chris Greer thing. But now you're looking at it, and it's starting to look like the opposite. It's starting to look like actually he is not a good fit for this defense under Anthony Weaver, and maybe he never has been. And we have to, again, I was a big fan of his coming out, but we have to look at what's going on in front of us, because what's going on in front of us, he always reminded me of, another player that I actually did like and still do like, Odafe Owe, back then Jason Owe, right? Going to the Baltimore Ravens, and they run similar style defense, and they traded away. They said, this doesn't work for our defense. This isn't the right kind of player for us. They traded him off to the Chargers. Of course, he's done, I think, really well with the Chargers. And maybe that could happen with Chop Robinson. But I think that what we're facing with now is we have to reconcile the possibility that he never was a good fit for the Anthony Weaver defense, despite, sort of what we were sold when the pick was made. And now, so long as this defense is in place and Anthony Weaver is there, maybe this is just reality. Because when you say extremely disappointing, Simon, we're talking about 11 pressures in 11 games. There's a different word for that, and it's not just disappointing. Like that's the thing that he's supposed to be good at. So I think that we really have to come to grips with the potential reality here that he is not meant for this defense, and the Dolphins truly traded the wrong guy in Jalen Phillips to another team, and as injury prone as Jalen Phillips has been, we now have to figure out whether that is what happened here. And so going forward, it does draw, between the last two high draft picks on the defense, Chop Robinson and Kenneth Grant. You're now starting. Oh, well, wait a minute. What kind of building blocks does an Anthony Weaver have for his style of defense going forward? Because clearly there's been trouble with Chop Robinson, and there's been trouble getting that fit with Kenneth Grant as well.
Yeah, no, Chop Robinson is in. Look, they invested the 25th overall pick in him. If he can have, and he's young enough, if he can have some type of renaissance, and they can recoup something, they can recoup a day 2 pick for him. If Anthony Weaver is going to stick around, then I think it's something you got to think about, because I just don't see, like, if Anthony Weaver is going to be around and he's just not going to play, then it's just a depreciating asset over time, and then you're essentially, forget the 25th overall pick, then you can forget about a day 2 pick, which is probably what he's worth right now if he flashes something for the rest of the season. All right, moving on to the offense. Jonas Savannah, his best game so far.
I thought you just said we're about to finish up here.
No, I said we're going to move on to the offense, and then we're going to finish up. We don't have that many young players on offense, so we're essentially just talking about the offensive line. Jonas Savannah, really good. His best game so far this season. I think Larry Borum has played well as of late, and I think the Cole Strange has reached the end. It's the Cole Strange time here in Miami has come to an end, but that's usually what happens to backup guards. So, two things, Simon. Your assessment of Jonas Savaiana and Austin Jackson is coming back after the bye. I'm moving Larry Borum to right guard and playing Austin Jackson at right tackle. Your thoughts on those two things?
I mean, I think that the return of Austin Jackson is being treated in some corners like the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And I think we're ignoring what's been in front of our noses for the last 5 years, which is that he's yet
Are you
another.
saying Jesus Christ is not good in pass protection?
You saying Jesus Christ can't hit a curveball?
Both of those things. I'm saying that Jesus Christ has missed 39 of the last 60 games. I think that's Austin Jackson's record. Something like that. Yeah, I mean, look, he's a mediocre player. He's had one above average season and he got overpaid. And yeah, here we are. I thought, look, one of the frustrations I had on Sunday was that the Dolphins, I thought, started outstandingly, and literally those kind of 5, pin and pull run plays to the outside, the kind of the outside zone stuff. And they were doing loads of funky shit in the run game, which I thought was great. Although there was one really weird play. Did you see that play where it was an inside handoff to Achan, and then Malik Washington kind of came across in front of him like he'd forgotten that he was supposed to do a motion and then did it when the play was underway, which I thought was really weird. But yeah, I thought those first 5 outside zone runs with the kind of pulling Borum and Strange, and there were a couple of plays where Brew was out in front, were just fantastic. And then they just disappeared. They're like 2.5 quarters. He just never went back to it. It's like, what are you doing? You've just found Achan's averaging 10 yards a carry here. Why are we just not doing this every single play? And Borum and Strange looked fantastic out in space, just killing dudes. And Strange was essentially, Bobby Wagner just wasn't able to get outside, and Strange was just sealing off Frankie Louvu. And this is unbelievable. Achan's going to run for like 600 yards in this game. It was like insane. And then we just didn't return to it. And I just was like, what are we doing? And it just went back to kind of McDaniel trying to outsmart himself and doing funky shit that wasn't really working. And and at the point where the funky stuff wasn't working, it was just like, Mike, just go back to the stuff that was brilliant early on. But yeah, I thought I would probably move Borum inside. I think he's less of a liability in pass protection there. And Jackson, who's a better player, but that's that's like saying he's the tallest dwarf, is going to come back. And I mean, look, the key would be trying to get James Daniels back, but I suspect he's probably that may be a bridge too far this season potentially. But yeah, I mean, having Jackson back is an upgrade, but upgrading from a Honda Civic to a Toyota RAV4 is not exactly going from a the basement to the penthouse. So it's an improvement, but I don't think it's everything that people are making it out to be, Chris.
Yeah, I think that the point is well made about Austin Jackson's career here is, he did have a good year. I mean, there's no denying that, but the injuries and combination injuries and always having been questionable in pass protection. I don't think there's been a point when he's not been questionable in pass protection. You have to keep in mind that the Mike McDaniel offense helps their tackles as much or more than any team in the league when it comes to pass protection. And that's a combination of Tua getting the football out. That's a combination of the quarterback timing built into the drop and into the pass play. And it's also a combination of the help, the chips and the spacing and the wide receivers that the tight ends, the running backs that go out there and run interference, the misdirection, everything that Miami does helps those tackles out. And then we went ahead and paid one of them, a big amount of money, even though he was a mediocre player that was being helped out by the system quite a bit. And so that's turning out to be a mistake. But Larry Borum, I mean, listen, if Larry Borum gets your juices flowing, then honestly, you must really like being 4-7. Because I think that, you know, ultimately this is still, you know, a one decent game does not, you know, suddenly make the guy good that way. And I would be very wary about moving him inside because he hasn't played there and he hasn't showed you that he can be good there. The one game that he did have, you know, this year or whatever, a small handful of outings that you can hang your hat on for him, we're at tackle, we're at right tackle. You cannot just assume these guys go in at right guard and be standouts because, you know, Larry Borum in his previous time and his previous teams did not stand out when he went inside to guard, in my opinion. I don't think you're necessarily getting anything better than Cole Strange there. And in fact, it might be considerably worse because you detract from chemistry, you detract from, you know, you start having him learn a new position and things like that. And so what you are learning, what you have spent a lot of sweat equity learning about Cole Strange and about which situations you can put him in and which ones you can't, suddenly just resets when you throw Larry Borum out there. Now, thankfully, the Dolphins aren't really competitive right now in terms of the playoffs and things like that. So, you know, you could argue, well, who cares? You know? So go ahead and learn. Go ahead and learn what you've got with Larry Borum at right guard. And I do understand, and I think that's a salient point. But you know, overall, I think that people are probably overrating what Larry Borum is going to show at guard, right, especially right away. And people make their opinions based on the first game. You know, that's true. So, you know, and two, what is Austin Jackson going to give the Dolphins coming back at right tackle? It's like Simon said, it's almost like treated like this pivotal moment or something like that. And I just don't know if that's actually true. I would have liked to have seen James Daniels because he is on a multi-year contract, right? And so you're going to have to be able to make a decision about whether we're going to carry him into next year, even though he was disappointing with the injury this year. And now, you know, the clock is ticking on that, and that we're going to reach a point where it doesn't matter what he shows because, you know, you can't take the injury risk with the amount of money that he's set to be paid next year, which isn't even necessarily that much, but yeah, still. So yeah, it's kind of, I don't think there's going to be necessarily a watershed moment, getting Austin Jackson back, and we'll see what they do with Cole Strange at right guard. Wouldn't be surprised if they maintain that and just keep going with that and see, because remember, this was a high draft pick himself, and I think, like with Juju Brents, they want to find out, you know, how deep that rabbit hole goes with him.
I've got before we get out of here, I have got the missed game numbers.
Oh yeah.
How many games has he played since we signed him, since we drafted him?
Was he a 2020 pick?
He was a 2020. He was 19th overall in 2020.
All right, so we're talking about, you know, 17 games.
He played 11 as a rookie, something like that.
So he's played 56 games total.
Oh man! And has he missed like 50?
No, not far off.
56 games. That means that he probably missed like 40 something, right? Or
39
or 40.
That's a lot.
That's
a 6 per season. He's essentially playing a college season every year in the NFL, but they play 16 and 17 at this level. All right.
Tristan Wirfs 5 picks earlier. AJ Terrell 2 picks earlier. CeeDee Lamb a pick earlier. Justin Jefferson 3 picks after.
Yeah.
Jordan Love.
It's actually 7 games off. That's not 6 games a year. That's 7 games a year. He plays 9.
Yeah.
He plays 10 games and misses 7 every year.
Yeah.
That's worse than Teron Armstead. How's that worse? How can he be worse than Teron Armstead that way?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's
a high bar.
Here. Yeah. By the way, a little housekeeping on James Daniels. It doesn't look like he'll be here for the Saints game because he's not doing any field work. He's doing rehab work, which means the closest he'll be back is the Jets. They are expecting Austin Jackson back. Darren Waller is doing field work, so Darren Waller could be returning against the Saints as well.
I'm a
Last
little
thing,
surprised that they'd pursue Waller coming back. I'm not surprised they'd pursue, Daniels coming back because he does have a multi-year contract. But Waller, what's the point? Anyway, whatever. I mean, he's good. Don't get me wrong.
he's only 39 yards away from Jonnu Smith's totals. So you got to try to overtake Jonnu Smith before that Pittsburgh game.
We had 3 first-round picks in 2020, don't you?
Yeah, right.
Just going through the.
And one of them had a great game against Jalen Waddle this past weekend.
Yeah, look at the players that were drafted in 2020: Joe Burrow, Andrew Thomas, Justin Herbert, Derek Brown, Tristan Wirfs, AJ Terrell, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Cesar Ruiz, Brandon Ayuk, Jordan Love, Jordan Brooks, T. Higgins, DeAndre Swift, Xavier McKinney, Rob Hunt, Jonathan Taylor.
We nailed that Jordan Brooks pick, Simon.
Yeah, shame it wasn't us. Jalen Johnson.
Shame it wasn't us.
Jalen Johnson, Jalen Hurts, J.K. Dobbins. Like, who else is on here?
J.K. Dobbins just took his 4th knee injury.
This is going to go down.
Zach Bourne. It's like
this. It's almost going to go down, Simon, like the I've got picks and money off season that Jeff Ireland was famous for, where he's like,
Bernard.
We're going to keep Jeff Ireland on because we've assembled all these draft picks, we've assembled all this cap space, and he's going to really go and do something, and then he just lays turd after turd after turd. It was the most, one of the most disastrous off seasons I've ever seen. And as we get further away from that 2020, it's like, well, it wasn't much better, and
it's like the Mike Mayock offseason with John Gruden 4 years ago. That was an unmitigated disaster. Like, they managed to miss on every single pick except the second edge player that they took on day 2, Max Crosby. Like, they nailed that one.
Alex Jalen Hawkins, L'Jarius Sneed, like Tyler Biadasz. There is some serious talent in this draft, and we didn't get any of it. Or we don't have any of it.
We didn't get any. All right, let's do game balls. My game balls on offense. Patrick Paul. His film is just really fun to watch from this past game. Any of you who have the All-22, just throw it on and watch Patrick Paul all game. He's extremely fun to watch. I put a couple of reps of his on there. He has that nastiness. He has the athleticism. Again, really fun to watch. Really effective player. Really, really good player. On defense, Jack Jones. Played very, very well in this game. He's had a few games this season. The thing is that you never know, when he's going to do something stupid. Didn't do something stupid in this game. He was pretty damn good in this game. Got the big pick. He's still hunting that pick 6, by the way, to keep that streak alive. He has a pick 6 in every season of his career. 3 for 3. This is his 4th season, so he needs that pick 6. So those are my 2 game balls. Your game balls, Simon.
I thought Aaron Brewer was excellent. Obviously, Achane was outstanding. I thought Brewer was excellent. Defensively, it's a bit hard. I mean, I don't think Jordan Brooks played particularly well, but he had 20 tackles, which is astonishing. Hard for me to give I don't think necessarily defensively you'd say. Jack Jones had the big play, so it's kind of easy to give it to him. I thought Minka played pretty well as well, I've got to say. But this is like picking the tallest dwarf, isn't it? Yeah, I'll say. I'll go for. Having 20 tackles in the NFL is pretty special, so I'll give it to Jordan Brooks.
Yeah, I'll go with Jack Jones on that one. You end the game in overtime with that pick and call the shot.
We never talk about special teams players, but Jake Bailey, I thought, has had
he's good.
Yeah, and he was brilliant again on Sunday.
But Jack Jones called a shot and ended the game in that overtime, and it wasn't just that. Yes, he got called for that pass interference, which I think almost nobody agreed with. That pass interference, which was oddly they picked up the flag on one that was a real pass interference and called that ball uncatchable, even though it hit Jack Jones on the helmet. Like he was less than 3 feet out of bounds when it hit him on the helmet. And I don't know if you're thinking about like trajectories, and that's catchable. That's catchable for a wide receiver on the sidelines. But they picked that one up and they threw the flag on the other one, which the other one was atrocious. But either way, you can cancel those out and say he had just a tremendous overall game, and he has not always had those kinds of games here. And so that's the kind of game that you could actually hang your hat on and say, well, these last two games, you hang your hat, absolutely hang your hat on that 2-game stretch and say, well, wait a minute, what are we looking at? So kudos to him.
Yeah, I think, and I said this earlier in the season, I think he's going to play himself into a contract somewhere else. Somebody's going to pay him something. It won't be us. All right.
Well, it could be because Weaver likes him a lot. So
yeah, Anthony Weaver does like him. Like he's like, just ask him a question about Jack Jones, he just starts smiling and talking about him, and he's like, Jack's different, and and his teammates, man, like that was a pretty fun locker room video. All right, we will be not with you for the rest of this week because there's no game this week. They have a bye week, so you get to watch consequence-free football this weekend. We will be back with you next week before Thanksgiving, so you have a whole week without us. And we'll talk about Saints Dolphins next week, and we'll probably pick that Thanksgiving slate for you next Wednesday. But till then.